Okay, so this week we're talking about analyzing the audience, or what is also known as an analysis of the audience, or audience analysis, okay? Now, audience analysis is simply just being able to adjust your message to the people whom you're speaking to, okay? So, for example, if you were to speak to a kindergartner about the importance of washing their hands, right? You might use smaller words. Instead of saying antibacterial soap, you would say germ-free soap, okay? And this is just a simple way of adjusting your message so that they understand, right? We don't use really big words when talking to little kids because they don't know those vocabulary words just yet. So, audience analysis, as I said, is the process of collecting as much information as possible about your audience to better understand who they are and what they actually care about. Because remember, as a speaker, you want something out of your audience, okay? Audience's analysis is important because you can't effectively communicate with an audience if you don't understand who they are, okay? Going back to the little kids, right? You can't talk to little kids about math, long division, right? If they don't understand how to count 1 through 10. Now, for many careers, there's lots of careers that do this. Almost every career does audience analysis, okay? Very specifically, think about ad campaigns, the people who make ads, like marketers, right? They are trying to sell you a product for a very specific audience, okay? And we'll talk about that a little bit more in our activity this week. So, reaching the right people and crafting a message that resonates with them specifically is crucial for achieving any success, okay? Even doctors have to do audience analysis. They have to be able to understand, read the room and be like, oh, your wrist is broken, or, your famigula or whatever is broken, right? They don't use really big, long medical terms when they speak to the normal person, okay? So audience analysis is just collecting information about the audience and adjusting it to the message, okay? And we do it every day. So why do we do this? Why, as public speakers, is it important to get the information, right, about your audience? Well, that's because we're audience-centered as speakers, because our primary purpose is to gain a desired response from your listeners, right? And we do this by always asking ourselves during the process of making a speech, who's listening? What do you want them to believe or do, right? Are you trying to persuade them to buy something? Are you trying to make them donate money? Are you just trying to inform them of something? Do you want them to be sad? Do you want them to be mad? Do you want them to be angry? All those things, right? And then you want to ask, how can I effectively compose or present my idea to them? Now, maybe that's like, okay, if I need to teach little kids how to wash their hands, maybe I bring in a sink and soap and paper towels and wash my hands in front of them, right? It all changes the delivery. If Smokey the Bear walks in, he's probably going to talk about fighting fires, right? Or forest prevention. Those are the sort of things that help us improve our credibility and help us craft messages for our audience. So remember, as public speakers, we are always audience-centered. Now, in audience analysis, both the speaker and the listeners have jobs, okay? A speaker's task is to make the audience want to pay attention to their message and then do something about it, okay? Now, every speech contains 2 messages that are sent by the speaker. There's one that is sent and one that is received by the audience, okay? Not everything you always say is heard or understood the same way as the audience will take it. So what I mean by that is, you might say one thing and your audience hears another. So how do you start making these messages, right? How do you start making a sent message, and how do you make a received message, okay? So you start by first making an objective. it's this very simple format. Blank wants blank, so that blank, right? And you can fill it in with anything. So let's say Ariel wants to teach kindergartners how to wash their hands so that we beat the COVID virus finally. Okay? Very simple statements that help you get going on what you want from the audience, right? So you can fill this in with anything. You could say aliens want to get to Earth so that they could have world domination. Okay? Pepsi Cola wants you to buy Pepsi so that they make more money. Okay? Very simple. So the audience receives, right? The auditory perception of the audience is always selective. This is what I meant by there's two messages that the speaker sends. There's one that's sent, that's your literal message, and the received is the one that is filtered through the audience's frame of reference. Frame of reference, if you do not remember, is how much or how little of the topic the audience members already know. It includes their personal beliefs, opinions, social status, age, gender, sexuality, so many things, so many of their demographics, right? How they've been treated. Now, because the audience has a very selective hearing when they receive a message, this makes them egocentric, meaning that they only pay attention to the messages that affect them directly, okay? So we're going to give this a shot. We're going to play a quick game. Who cares? President Biden, bakery owners, college students, and quarterbacks. Things, yard lines, student loan forgiveness, 40% off, 50% off flour, welfare and prosperity of the nation. I'm going to give you a minute here. I want to look at these, and I want you to draw lines in your mind to exactly who would care about what, okay? All right, did you think about it? Let's give this a shot. So, President Biden would probably care the most about the welfare and prosperity of the nation, right? Why? Well, because he's our president. He should care about how us, the people, are doing, right? Meanwhile, bakery owners, they probably care a lot more about 50% off flour because bakery owners use a lot of flour. I mean, right now they probably care a little bit more about eggs being on sale, but that's okay. Now, college students probably care more about student loan forgiveness because they are college students and lots of them have loans, okay? And lastly, quarterbacks care the most about yard lines. Why? Because quarterbacks need to throw lots of yard lines in order to win, okay? So, why wouldn't I talk to President Biden about yard lines? Because he probably doesn't care about that message so much. But what can I do to make him care about yard lines or care about 50% off flour? That's what we're talking about when we talk about audience analysis, okay? Moving on. So, again, let's not forget that the audience receives. These are psychological principles that have two important implications for the speakers, okay? So as a speaker, you know that your audience is egocentric. You know that the listeners are going to judge your speech through their frame of reference or their FOR, okay? Frame of reference. Speakers have to take care to relate the message to the specific audience's frame of reference, all right? So the president, I don't know if he's ever played football, but you might want to, if you're talking to him about yard lines, you're talking to him about, Tom Brady, you're going to want to adjust that message to him, okay? Maybe you start using things like, the liberty of yard lines and freedom and justice for all at the kick post, okay? So how do we adjust the messages? Well, first we have to collect what is called demographics. Now, demographic traits of the audience and how they might react is a useful tool, but needs to be conducted properly. Why does demographic collection need to be done properly? Well, because we need to avoid ethnocentric beliefs, right? Believing that one group is superior over another. And we also have to avoid stereotyping, which is to believe unfairly that all people or things with a particular characteristic are the same. I like to think of stereotyping as dumb blonde jokes, right? And yes, there's many other examples of stereotyping. But dumb blonde jokes are one, right? That is pretty common, right? And it's taking a demographic of people, very simply, and poking fun, right? Stereotyping is why we have to conduct properly. Now, demographic collection should also always be combined with situational audience analysis. And we'll go over that in the next few slides. Okay. So from this slide, the most important thing to understand is that demographics are traits that we collect, and we need to avoid stereotyping. Okay. So demographics are more than just age. Okay. It's religious views, race, ethnicity, culture, gender, sexuality, group membership. Now, this can mean like, they're in a fraternity or a sorority, they're in the football team, they're a Best Buy employee, okay? Groups that we belong to, okay? Your tax bracket, right? How much money you make, your social status. Are you Kim Kardashian or are you Kanye, right? Your education. Do you have a PhD? Do you have a master's? Do you have a high school diploma? Okay. Your location, right? If we are going to talk about speeding laws in California, we probably shouldn't be pulling resources from Texas, right? We shouldn't be like, well, in Texas, you can't go 75 on a ramp. No one cares in California, right? Because we would rather hear about our own speeding laws. Now, psych, right? They're psychological being, right? Their physicalness too, right? Are they happy? Are you talking to people that are grieving? Are you talking to people that are mad? Okay. These are all called demographic traits that we can understand, that we could generalize to fit messages to. And I say generalize very specifically again, because we want to avoid ethnocentric beliefs like stereotyping. So it's looking pretty serious. You got to look at the situational analysis, right? When we look at situational analysis, we are looking at the size of the room, the size of the group of people talking to, the physical location. Again, if we're talking to Texans, we should probably talk to Texans about Texas laws, right? We also need to talk about the disposition towards the speaker and the occasion and the topic, right? So what's the audience's interest in the topic, their knowledge of the topic, their attitude toward the topic, okay? So let's pretend we're going to a broccoli conference. At the broccoli conference, we're a cupcake person, and we want to give a speech about refried sugars and how refried sugars in cupcakes isn't bad for you, okay? Well, to address that message to the broccoli people, we might have to think, hey, are they going to like sugar? Are they going to accept my belief on sugar? What are their views on sugar already? Am I giving this presentation at 5:30 after dinner or before lunchtime? Okay. Situational. Situational is always a little bit more important than demographic. It's a little bit more credible, right? Because it's easier to avoid stereotyping and ethnocentric beliefs in situational analysis, okay? Because we could actually see like, okay, we're talking outside in the middle of July. It's hot. How do I talk about global warming, right? How can it be effective? So that's situational analysis. Now, great. So We understand that we have to get information like demographics and the situational analysis in order to effectively construct a message to specific groups of people, right? But how do I access this information? Well, first, you could do some questionnaires. You could go around the room, ask questions. How many kids do you have? What's your mother's middle name? What's the last word of your social? Things like that, okay? Or maybe you go ahead and you mingle and you're just like, hey, did you see the Super Bowl last night? How was it, right? You just kind of get around and talk to people. You can investigate. Maybe you're going undercover, right? Like 21st Jump Street. Or maybe you're doing credible research, right? Maybe you're looking through scholarly journals and articles and you're trying to find information about people, right? What are their beliefs? You could do interviews, right? This is from the horse's mouth, right? This is what I like, this is what I don't like. Now, there is a lot of improper ways, right? One example would be movies. Movies don't tell the truth, right? Not always. So movies would be an improper way. A music video would be an improper way. A TikTok, right? Things that are not credible. Things that we can't do situational or demographic analysis on are also improper ways to access this information. So after you collect all this information, right, what do? Well, you have to adapt the speech to your audience. Now it's personal. Now the audience wants to pay attention because you were like, hey, I know my audience is receiving a message that I'm trying to give them. So I'm going to make it personal where they want to listen, right? Now, your adaptation should always be a part of your prep process throughout the presentation, right? So you keep your audience centered at every step of your presentation, from the intro to the conclusion. You have to ask throughout the entire speech, like, how will the audience likely respond to what I say? Are they going to laugh? Are they going to cry? Are you going to throw tomatoes at me? Right? How can I adjust my message to make it clear or convincing as possible? How can I make them want to buy Pepsi Cola? How can I make them want to buy Life Alert and things like that? Now remember, no matter how hard a speaker works ahead of time, things do not always go smoothly on the day of the speech, okay? So sometimes you could prepare and prepare and prepare for a specific audience, but then you'll walk in thinking, as a cupcake person, you're walking into the broccoli conference and they're like, hey, by the way, you're actually talking to carrot people, right? Then as a speaker, we're like, oh, shoot, how am I going to talk to carrot people? Like, I prepared my speech for broccoli people. You have to be flexible, right? You have to adapt that message again. So just a warning, sometimes things don't go as smoothly as we wish, all right? But it's okay. No one ever makes you talk to carrot people. So here's your points to keep or your takeaways for the week, okay? Public speakers must always be audience-centered because that's who you're talking to. And that's the desired effect that you want from your message. That's who you want to listen to you, okay? Now, who's egocentric? Always the listeners. Audiences are egocentric. There's demographic and situational analysis. This is how you collect information about an audience in order to adapt the message, okay? And remember, you collect information about egocentric audiences and you adapt. You adapt your message for them to listen. And you have to be creative and sometimes very flexible. So that concludes the discussion for this week. And that's all.